Hi, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started in about 1 minute so folks can have a chance to come on in. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Abby Heilman. I'm the Salt Watch Coordinator here at the Isaac Walton League of America. We're really excited this year because we are doing sort of regional kickoff webinars. And so the one today is for the DC metro region. And we have a full lineup of really awesome panelists that I'm really excited to hear from. And we'll get to them just in a minute, but I'm going to give you a quick background of the Salt Watch program. And also, we do have some poll questions today. So I'm going to go ahead and get this poll started. Okay, on your screen, you should see a question that says, how did you first hear about or get involved in Salt Watch? So if you can type that into the poll, that would be awesome. And if you're having any issues typing that into the poll, please feel free to put that into the chat. Hello, everyone who are just joining us. Welcome to the DC Metro Region Salt Watch Kickoff. For those of you who are just joining us, please feel free to answer this poll question. It'll be on the screen. How did you first hear about or get involved in Salt Watch? We'd love to hear from you. I'll give you about 30 more seconds to answer that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. See if we can share some of those results. We can do that towards the end. Okay. Awesome. Thank you for answering that poll. We have 3 more poll questions throughout the webinar, so please feel free to answer them, and we will, if we have time at the end, share those results with all of you. So again, welcome if you're just joining us to the Greater DC Metro Region Salt Watch Kickoff. My name is Abby Heilman, and I'm the Salt Watch Coordinator here at the Isaac Walton League. I'm not going to go into too much detail today because we have a lot of really great panelists to hear from, and I'll introduce them shortly. Before I go too far, though, I do want to introduce maybe a new face to some of you. We have a new Save Our Streams coordinator for the Mid-Atlantic region. Maggie, if you're still on, do you want to come on screen there? There you go. So Maggie Dombrowski is our Mid-Atlantic Save Our Streams coordinator. Do you want to say anything about yourself at all? Not to put you on the spot.
No worries. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here, part of the team. So yeah, I can also be a resource if you ever have any questions about anything Salt Watch or otherwise water quality related in the Mid-Atlantic. So yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. And Maggie will be helping us out a little bit with Salt Watch, as she said, but also the Save Our Streams program. So feel free to reach out to her if you have any questions. So a little bit of background. I said I wouldn't go into too much. There's a lot of misconceptions about salting in the winter using road salt. The image on the left we see a lot of the time, really just you can feel that crunch underfoot. You can visibly see all of the salt. In many cases, that is way too much. What you should really be seeing is sort of a sprinkling of salt on some of these sidewalks and roadways. A little bit of salt goes a long way, both in reducing the amount of ice and also polluting the environment as well. So we want to cut back on that salt. The image there on the right is really what we should be seeing. A 12-ounce mug or your typical coffee mug or cup holds enough salt to salt a 20-foot long driveway or 10 sidewalk squares, which is about 2 parking spaces. So those granules should be spaced out about 3 inches apart for that salt to be the most effective. So a little bit of salt really goes a long way. And salt really does impact a lot of different things. It impacts our wildlife, especially the freshwater aquatic life that lives in freshwater waterways that might not be used to more salty conditions. Infrastructure is really impacted as well. Our pipes and bridges and roadways, our vehicles, all of those things can be corroded by road salt. Our drinking water can be impacted. Salt is something that can't just simply be filtered out of drinking water. In a lot of wastewater treatment facilities, they actually don't have the infrastructure or the funding to remove salt from the water. So folks who are on really low sodium diets, who maybe have hypertension, they might not realize that they're getting additional salt from their drinking water from road salt. Different habitats can be impacted, especially like native plantings or turf grass and trees that are alongside roadways and sidewalks. And our pets can be impacted as well from walking on that salt, as well as maybe licking their paws after going on a walk on salty conditions. They can get sick and dehydrated from salt as well. So lots of different impacts. And like I said earlier, a little bit of salt really goes a long way. Once salt enters the environment, there's really no feasible way to remove it. And so it really only takes 1 teaspoon of salt to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water. And you're typically buying a bag of salt as a 50-pound bag. So a 50-pound bag of salt, you scale that up, it can permanently pollute 10,000 gallons of water. So again, a little bit of salt goes a really long way. So some goals of Salt Watch, and many of you have seen this before, to raise awareness in the general public about the connection between salt and stream health, to identify chloride hotspots in freshwater, and to advocate for smarter salt application by sharing some of those results with private landowners and local and state agencies. And that's really what we're here for. We're trying to learn more about what's happening in the waterways in our backyards and to advocate for smarter salting practices. So as many of you are aware, we do give out free Salt Watch test kits, which include 4 chloride test strips, instructions for how to take a sample, and instructions for how to upload that data, as well as a conversion chart. It's that sort of white card that you see there on the screen to the right, to convert the units of the test strip into chloride units. And we really couldn't do this program without the support of all of our partners. Nationwide, we have 64 official Salt Watch partners. Many of them are shown here on the map. And many of those partners here are present too and will speak today. So I'm really excited to have you all join us. And there will be some time at the end for if you'd like to share your story, even if you're not a panelist, and share some of the initiatives that you've been working on in your area as well. So just to go into some data really quickly before I turn it over, nationwide across the country, we have received, since the beginning of the program, which was launched in 2018, we've received over 22,000 data points, which is really awesome. The larger the dot, if you're looking at the map, the larger the dot, the more data we've received from that region, and the color of the dot corresponds to that chloride concentration from the data that we're receiving back. So as you'll notice, a lot of the dots, especially towards the north, where we have more winter weather, and especially in metropolitan areas where there's lots of impervious surfaces like concrete and sidewalks and things, those areas tend to have really higher chloride concentration. So the breakdown there is to the right. So 20%, 27% of the samples we've received back since the beginning of the program, and this data, by the way, is until today, was between 0 and 30 parts per million. That's below the range that we can see on the test strips. 41% of the samples are fair. It's within the range we can see on the test strips, but it may be a little bit elevated. 19% of those samples are poor, so between 100 and 230 parts per million. It is said that anything above 100 parts per million is generally anthropogenically caused or human-caused sources of chloride within waterways. In some areas, like Maryland, that number is significantly lower than that, like around 50. Other areas, it might be even lower than that, like 5 or lower. So 19% of those samples we know are definitely elevated. So between 100 and 230 parts per million or milligrams per liter. And then 13% of those samples are toxic, so above 230 parts per million. And that's toxic to a lot of our freshwater aquatic life, like macroinvertebrates that live in those streams. Zooming in directly onto the greater DC metro region, you can see there's a lot of red dots going on here. So 14% of the samples are excellent, 42% of the samples fair, 25% poor, and then 19% of those samples are toxic. Last season, which ran from July 2023 to June 2024, we received 2,044 data points from the greater DC metro region. 19% of the samples are excellent, 46% fair, 20% poor, and 15% toxic. And then looking for this season, so this is just a couple months of data. So July until today, we've received 221 data points. 10% of those samples are excellent, 77% fair, 12% poor, and 1% toxic. So we're not seeing those spikes that we might see during the winter time yet, but there are still quite a few samples that have come back that have been poor and toxic. So definitely above those naturally occurring levels. And as many of you know, all of this data goes into the Clean Water Hub, which is our national online water quality database. It's meant to be really publicly accessible, and we've created it with usability in mind. We're trying to have that data be really easy to access, understand, and share. And one way that we achieve that is through some different color-coded interactive maps. And you're welcome to visit that website at www.cleanwaterhub.org. Where does that data go once we receive it? So some of that data is shared with the US EPA annually. It is available to government agencies and water quality organizations to really identify some of those hotspots that we're seeing, especially within the Salt Watch program. And other programs that we have might be able to track the impact of best management practices and restoration and things as well. Within the Isaac Walton League, we use that data in our annual report and as updates to volunteers, and then also to outreach to media sources. And then clean water advocates like you can use that data as data to support things like letters to the editor and contacting local and state representatives, as well as educating your community. So we are up to another poll question. So I'll go ahead and launch that for you. So the question is, what have you done beyond monitoring? And some of the options that we put in here, you can write something else if you've done other things, like talk to a neighbor, reduce salt at home, write a letter to the editor, submit an action alert, something else. We just want to know what you've done. What are some of those things that you may have done beyond monitoring? I'll give you about a minute to answer that. So what are some things that you've done beyond monitoring? Here's some options. Maybe you've talked to a neighbor, reduced your salt use at home, written a letter to the editor, that's the LTE that's there, submit an action alert, go to the local town hall, something like that. About 40 seconds left. Okay, 10 seconds. Write those last thoughts. Greg wrote in the chat, what is an action alert? Is it a formal process? So for our programs, whenever we see, especially like a bill at the state level or maybe a local level, you can actually sign up to receive those alerts. And we usually have sort of a pre-written drafted letter that you can send to your local or state representatives. So maybe Sam or Maggie can put a link to sign up to the action alerts in the chat. And it's something that you can just send via email, or if you wanted to print that out and mail it, you can do that as well. So Sam just put in the chat where the action alerts live. Awesome. Thank you for sharing some of those responses with us for the poll. And again, if we have time at the end, we'll go through some of those. What we're really looking for is taking that data that we've collected, because we have a lot of data within the DC metro region, and turning that data into some sort of action. Whether you're reducing salt at home, maybe you're writing in performance-based practices on a contract for somebody that you're hiring to do a road salt application during the winter time. It doesn't have to be like a huge thing, like getting an opinion piece in the Washington Post or testifying at a city council. Any little thing that you do really makes a big impact. And we're really trying to be here to help. We're looking for people to go from absolutely no background with road salt pollution and not really knowing that it's a pollutant, to get those people to then become monitors and then become clean water advocates. So just as a sort of thought going forward, we'd love for people to take more action. So another poll question, and we're almost done with those polls. We have two more here. So this one's a multiple choice. You can select as many as you want. What is a Salt Watch action you plan to take this year? So write a letter to the editor, that's that LTE, write a letter to a representative, talk to your neighbor, reduce salt at home, or if something else that you're planning on doing might not be written there, please feel free to write that into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Give you about 30 more seconds to do this one. So what is a Salt Watch action you plan to take this year? Write a letter to the editor, write a letter to the representative, talk to your neighbor, reduce salt at home, or other. And please write that into the chat if you have an other action that you want to take or plan to take this year. Okay, 5 more seconds. Thank you for all your responses. The people who responded, some 30% write a letter to the representatives, 100% talk to your neighbor. That's awesome. Reduce salt at home was about 60%, and then some other results. So maybe there's some that are popping up in the chat right now. Awesome. So Friends of Cabin John Creek webinar for our members, and use your Salt Watch kit frequently. We love to see that. Thank you for sharing those. Okay, and again, we are here to help, and we are here as a resource to help you sort of expand beyond monitoring and do additional actions. On our website, saltwatch.org, under the What You Can Do section, we have fact sheets, we have flyers that you can print and hand out. We have an advocacy guide for how to start a Salt Watch campaign in your community. We do have a number of resources in Spanish as well, and we have some template letters to representatives and letters to the editor as well. And we do have some toolkits. We just recently released a faith-based toolkit for faith-based communities. So some actions that folks can do within their congregations. We have a toolkit for our Isaac Walton League of America chapters, but this can certainly be used by watershed organizations as well. And we do have an event toolkit like the How to Run a Paint the Plow event. And so can be a really awesome resource if you want to do a really neat art project and team up with your local Department of Transportation for that. And we do have a brand new resource that was released just a couple weeks ago. It is a letter to the editor and op-ed guide. So please feel free to check that out as well. Some sort of best practices for writing some letters to the editor. And I did want to mention that we do have a SaltWatch DC Metro Region Facebook group, so please feel free to join that. We only have 14 members right now, but we would love this to be a place where you can share water monitoring successes and best practices, report some of those chloride-related pollution issues, band together for advocacy, and just sort of let people know maybe what are some events that are going on within your community around road salt pollution and some things that you can do. So please feel free to join that group. Again, SaltWatch DC Metro Region is that Facebook group. And one last poll question. I'm going to go ahead and launch that. So this question is, what could help you leap the hurdle of going beyond monitoring and complete some sort of advocacy action? So maybe you've been monitoring for a while. What is something that can help you sort of go beyond monitoring and complete one of those advocacy actions that we talked about? Give you about 1 minute for this. What could help you leap the hurdle of going beyond monitoring and complete some sort of advocacy action? Might be writing a letter to the editor, might be talking to your neighbors, a letter to your representative, signing on to an action alert, seeing a salt pile and cleaning that up, or contacting someone to get that cleaned up or covered. 10 more seconds for that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. If you're still typing, please put your answer in the chat because we'd love to hear from you. But I do want to get to our other panelists here. And locally, as many of you know, we do a lot of outreach events. So tabling events at farmers markets. We'll be at Oktoberfest again this year in Gaithersburg. Hiking events, we've been teaming up with ICPRB, the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin, to do hikes each year, which is really fun. So doing some hikes while monitoring. And we have hosted trainings again this year for both Montgomery County and Gaithersburg, any applicators who would like to learn more about smart salting as well. And I know Greg Sandy is going to talk a little bit more about another training that's coming up that's really exciting as well. So trying to meet people where they are. These are just some fun little memes that we've created about road salt pollution and sort of lowering your impact. And just to leave you on these couple things, so shovel early and often to reduce that snow before it turns into ice, scatter salt. A little bit of salt really goes a long way, and then sweep up any excess salt and reuse it. You can store it in a closed container. Maybe you spilled a little bit too much, or maybe a storm event has passed. Feel free to sweep that salt up, store it, and then you can use it during the next storm event. These are some really easy ways to reduce road salt pollution at your own home. And I did want to mention too, we have Winter Salt Awareness Week. It runs from January 27th through January 31st. I think we will be having an event at maybe the Isaac Walton League headquarters on January 31st. So if you'd like to join in to that in-person sort of media monitoring day, please stay tuned because we'll have more information about that coming soon. So this is something where there's speakers every single day, nationwide or statewide. So a really cool week that is put on by Wisconsin Saltwise in Wisconsin, but is national. So please salt responsibly. If you have any questions, please feel free to visit saltwatch.org. There's frequently asked questions and resources available there, or email me at saltwatch@iwla.org. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Greg Sandy. He is from Maryland Department of the Environment, and I will get his presentation started here. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Greg. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate the work you're doing on getting the word out, because one of the things that we at the department have realized that a lot of people don't realize this is a problem. And so just bringing up the issue to people and having them understand it has been a big challenge, both for our legislature and for a lot of our constituents. So I'm going to go over some of the things that we at the department are looking at and our response to this issue, and to give you kind of an idea of how we tackle it from a statewide perspective. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So back in 2010, I think I might be jumping my slides here. The State Highway Administration 2011, they put together a salt management plan. We've decided to build upon that and to incorporate the salt management plan requirement into all of our phase 1 MS4 permits. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically just a stormwater permit that covers most of our large counties within the central portion of the state. The third portion of it, is what we're talking about here: education and outreach, making sure that people understand that this is a problem and what they can do about it. The fourth part is a new program that the state has now put together with coordination from ICPRB, the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin, and then also the University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center and the Chesapeake Landscape Professional Network, to offer a voluntary applicator training for those folks that are both applicators but also property management professionals as well, because one of the things we have seen is that money drives everything within this business, and if you can make it more attractive for both applicators and property managers to use less while increasing their profit margins, then that's where we're really going to see a lot of this go forward. Next slide, please. So here's where I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. There was a state law back in 2010 that required SHA to develop the salt management plan. They did so in 2011, and they were able to reduce their salt over the next 5 years, their application rates, from about 50%. So when you institute these programs, it shows that it can be done. It also describes a lot of the technical aspects about how to manage a road network, which is helpful for a lot of the salt management plans that we're requiring of our stormwater management programs as well. Next slide. So to give you a little bit of background, those MS4 permits that I was talking about, they cover about 90% of impervious surface in Maryland. And if you go to our stormwater website, you can see maps where it's really like central Maryland, a little bit on to the outside of the west and to the northeast. But there's also MS4 permits on the eastern shore as well, and we're looking to update some of what we call the phase 2 permits here in the near future to add some of the requirements that we've done from some of the larger jurisdictions, so that we have even broader coverage going forward. So we're looking at a couple of things that we want them to do. Specifically, we want them to provide training for people both internally and to increase that education and outreach component as well. We want them to at least report a basic amount of materials that have been used over the season, so that we can have a measure to look at how successful programs are going to be going forward. So we are looking to receive these plans within the next year or two, review them, and then provide comment to the jurisdictions and get those going. Next slide, please. So here's one thing I can't stress enough: education and outreach, making people aware that this is even a problem. We're threading the needle on two different issues, human health, environmental health, and commerce. People getting to work on time, schools being open, all that kind of stuff during a storm event. So that's why we're really saying for now is stop over applying. We still need to have our schools open in some way, shape, or form. Yes, I'm aware we can do things like telework and teleschool, but I have 2 children of my own, and that's very difficult sometimes, especially with working families. So there's ways to kind of get the word out about the over application while maintaining public safety and commerce within the state. Next slide, please. So getting into our new training and certification program, this Smart Salt training that's being offered by the state and its partners is really looking at landscaping companies, private applicators, people that do even local governments that maintain schools and things like that, their own facilities. And what we're trying to do is educate them on ways to use less while maintaining that public safety. And that includes, detailed planning before the storm, during the storm, and after storm. You got to think about this ahead of time while you're doing it, and afterwards kind of having that assessment on how can I do it better. And the why is pretty apparent. Abby laid it all out ahead of me. So thank you for that. And hopefully what we'll see is through this impact, we get more people incorporated into the training program. They see a better value in their business, and they can promote themselves with this applicated or this training and certification. Next slide, please. So what is included in it? There's about 4 hours of independent study. We have discussion forums so that industry professionals can share knowledge together. And then we have a event where on the first slide, it shows where they were at a facility looking at how to calibrate spreaders, looking at new technologies such as back of a pickup brine technologies. There's brine equipment that can be used on sidewalks even now. So there's a lot of things out there that can be done, but it takes time, money, but most important, the education of those folks and convincing them why it's good for both business and for everyone else. And one of the things we do take very close to heart is getting that feedback from people that take the course to see whether where we hit in terms of their needs and versus our needs, and how we can better improve the training going forward. Next slide. So here's a link. You can hit the QR code, and that'll take you to our training website. I believe that's there's something for the Environmental Finance Center, and you can learn a little bit more about what is in the training through the informational video. And if you are interested in registering for the training, it's about $50. And need to register in 2 days. Sorry, it's a little late, but we'll get it out a little bit earlier next year. And we fully intend on doing it next year as well. Next slide, please. So just want to reiterate the value of the volunteer monitoring that we see out there. No surprise that we're seeing a lot of toxic or poor conditions in the highly urbanized areas of our county or states and cities. There's a lot of road in those areas, and during winter events there's going to be a lot of salt. So it helps to highlight the potential successes going forward, as we're seeing the impacts now. If we can convince people to do less, maybe we'll see those reds go from red to orange to yellow to green, hopefully in the future. Maybe not quite so much green, but definitely helps for us to see these from a spatial perspective, because a lot of people are visual and they don't just look at the numbers that come from things that MDE provides. Next slide, please. So final thing, I mean, I didn't want to go over everything SALT. That could take us an extra 2 hours, but please visit our website. We do also, like Isaac Walton League, we have our own resources as well that you can use. One thing that I would put a plug out is if you're thinking of ways to help, we're always considering educational campaigns in schools and stuff like that. I'm not quite sure how we get to that level, but just definitely something for people to consider. It's going to take behavioral change, because SALT, the main way we reduce it is to reduce application and not necessarily through treatment within the environment. So I'll leave it at that. And if there's any questions for me, I'm happy to take some.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Greg. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put those on the chat. I believe Maggie put the link for the Smart Salt training in the chat. And if you know of someone who is a road salt applicator, please have them check out this training. Sam and I actually took it as a pilot last year, and it's a really excellent training. And so definitely spread the word, get the word out. I know there's not too many days to sign up for it yet, or left, but it is a really awesome training. And so please check that out. And Maryland Department of the Environment has a lot of really awesome resources on their website as well. So please feel free to check that out. Christine has a question in the chat for you. How long is the training? A couple of hours or a longer course?
Yeah, so I think we estimate up to about 4 hours of doing the virtual training. And then there's usually about like 1 to 2 informational or sessions, about half an hour to an hour, where you share information. And then the in-person training, I want to say, is about 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, and it is over like the period of a couple weeks or a couple months too. So it's spread out pretty nicely. So it's not like a full 1-day commitment type situation. I think it's a really good put together course. Any other questions for Greg? Okay, if you do have any questions, we're going to keep moving on. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. And if Greg has a chance to stay on for the rest of the webinar, we'll get those answered. If he has to leave for any reason, that's totally fine, and we'll get those questions answered for you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to turn this over now to Ryan Zerby from the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection. So Greg, thank you again very much for your presentation. So Ryan, if you're still on, ready to go, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, I am. There we go. 1 second, and I'll share. See if I can get this all to work. All right. Did it work?
I'm not seeing it yet, but you should be able to share now.
Let's try again. Oh, there we go. Okay. Is that working?
Yep, you're good.
I can see? Okay. All right. So my computer is a little shifted here from the camera and where my presentation is. So I'm going to be looking on the side here a little bit. Thank you, Abby. I can't reiterate enough what Abby and Greg have said about SALT and the SALT Watch program. Today, I'm going to focus a little bit more on just what Montgomery County has going on and where they're at. So the background, this is the problem. This is from WSSC. I do apologize. It's a little bit outdated. I think Abby has the more recent one. But just the increase in the level of salt in the Patuxent and Potomac rivers in Montgomery County over the past 30 years has been significant. Here it says it's a 260% increase. I think it's about 300% right now over the past 2 years here. So This is just the Patuxent River. And then we have the Potomac River, a 200% increase. So as they mentioned earlier, if you have a salt restricted diet, we're really getting to those levels where it is becoming a problem. So we have a salt management plan in the county, and it's a 42-page document that we're working on. It's due into the Department of Environmental, I'm sorry, the MDE, Maryland Department of Environment, by the end of the year. So we're working on that. We actually just hired a new person for our MS4 permit that'll be focusing on the compliance for and improving the salt management plan. And these are just a couple of highlights from that the plan that we have going on. We did an audit, I think it was in 2015, 2016, about our salt use, and it really gave us kind of a trajectory or path going forward on how to reduce the amount of salt and cost savings for the county. They do pre-treatments before storms using the salt brine. That's been an experiment that's been being used over time. It doesn't work at all for all situations, but it is also a very good pre-treatment technique for that. We've been identifying sensitive areas and watersheds. The Patuxent and around the reservoir is, from my understanding, is one that will be identified as a sensitive area. The use of rubber-tipped plow blades, and of course, more focus on calibrating equipment, the county equipment, and educating the contractors, making sure that is keen. Keeping a keen eye on the pavement temperatures and sensors that are throughout the county and the weather forecast. Of course, it may seem very simple, but that is an area that we are really focused on there. So you know what to apply, when, and how. Developing the training materials or training manuals for the employees and the contractors. Doing during and post-storm monitoring, doing the street sweeping of any spills. We have a 311 system. I think everyone from the area familiar with. One thing that has happened last year, we started working on the KBAs. We call them knowledge-based articles. So when you call into 311, you issue your comment, complaint, or what have you, and the call office has a article that they can go off of what the information is and where they can direct people. Before it was basically just cleanups that needed to be done on the roadways in the county, and now we have a new one that is if too much was being applied, so we can get those knowledge-based articles and get more people commenting on that. So we also, of course, we're utilizing good housekeeping plans, working with the Department of General Services and some other partners, and educating our residents and private contractors finally. Okay, next slide. No, that's my turn. Sorry about that. So we started a campaign back in 2019. Seems like a very long time ago already, but we started doing the winter salt presentations and partnering with our outreach partners, participating in the jurisdictional outreach work group, which is basically the greater DC area too. Features Howard County, even north of Virginia. I know Isaac Walton League is in that group, several from around the area. We developed a new website, montgomerycountymd.gov/salt, and we created the 123 Be Salt Wise campaign. And I think I had that in the slide before. But we decided that we wanted to start on a residential focus to begin with. So that was the first 2 to 3 years. And we created bilingual tip cards, which I think was the slide before, if you can see. That's the Don't Be Salty, Be Salt Wise card. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. We started a social media campaign and did some digital signboards in all the county buildings. So if you've ever been in any of the buildings in Montgomery County, like your libraries or service centers and things like that, they have screens in the buildings that can tell you what's happening in the community, things like that, and they basically serve as advertisements. So we put some of those digital boards, education signs in all the county buildings. worked on e-newsletters and did some press events. The county has a snow summit every year. So we started working with Department of Transportation on that and kind of did a partnership with WSSC for that type of event. We have a Clean Water Montgomery grant program, and we were providing grants to some nonprofits. Isaac Walton League has been a beneficiary of that, and they have been working on the Salt Watch program from some fundings from the Clean Water Montgomery grant program. And another partnership was with WSC as well and the Montgomery County Public Schools. They were working on a revised road salt biology unit, and that was fairly successful. I don't know if it's continuing on. I know that that happened about 2 years ago, but I need to get some updates on that one. So in 2022 and through 2024, we had an employee focus where, again, when I was talking about having those digital boards, but in the county buildings, but we also had areas in the county where, like libraries, for example, where Department of General Services would put out the salt, but then we would have employees that would request more, which necessarily wasn't beneficial. And so we're working with those types of departments to increase the education, and that, more is not necessarily helpful. Still, safety is still our number one, but you don't have to put on more. And then our future, working with property managers and private contractors to hit the areas for commercial buildings, private parking lots, things like that. Okay, so here is our campaign. The shovel right away, very similar to some of the other ones that we've seen already. A 12-ounce mug, melt 10 sidewalk squares, and then sweep and reuse. It's easy as 1, 2, 3. And we did this on these are the digital signboards. We did that in bilingually, and they had vertical and horizontal ones. And then lastly, with the employees, just kind of getting that focus on thinking about what you can do. You want to plan ahead before you come into work. Like if you're going to telework, and if you have to drive into the office, if you're an essential employee, you want to be able to plan ahead, slow down, don't have to go into work that fast. I don't know if everybody wants to do that in the first place, but and then if you do see some old oversalting, please call 311 to help prevent that. The second part, just having them have an understanding of the environmental aspects of it. It contaminates our drinking water. Using that graphic from WSSC, they got a flyer that was sent out to all the department directors, and that it contaminates our drinking water, harms our aquatic life, and corrodes our infrastructure. Well, here's our social media package design for the residential awareness campaign. And just, we've seen some of these already today, but what is the proper amount of salt to be put out? You want to have basically a quarter distance between some of the kernels, the granulars. And also, of course, everyone loves puppies and babies. So keeping them pet safe salt alternatives. Be prepared. And then we have posting our updates and videos. We've had a good relationship with the news crews, and they've come out to focus on some of our projects. Here we are at one of the salt domes. I believe this is in the city of Gaithersburg. This is my coworker Cindy over here, and then I'm out there just showing people the proper way to salt if you have a driveway or a sidewalk. Things like that. I don't know. Let's see if this will play. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. so that's our little video. Again, I'm not sure if you could hear it or not, but hopefully you could, and you can still get some of the understanding of what we were talking about there. There we go. Oh, the last one? Okay. And then just a couple of resources. We've also been promoting the state's training, any of the Salt Watch trainings that Isaac Walton League has been doing, and just working together with all of our partners. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Does anyone have any questions for Ryan? I see a comment in the chat. Last winter, we saw excessive amounts of salt applied on public parking lots, library parking lots, rec centers, etc. Sets a poor example for private property owners and managers.
Yes, again, that's something we're working with as far as the libraries and things like that. That would be the Department of General Services. Again, it's kind of a newer relationship, I guess you would say. But that's again just kind of a work in progress on working on these things. And that would be where you report those kinds of things to 311, and they can get that to the proper groups so that they can address those situations. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, and again, we still do need that salt to stay safe during the winter, but a lot of times we might come across some oversalting events, whether that's public or private. And so it's good to know who to report those to get that cleaned up, because we're all trying to stay safe at the end of the day and sort of balance between environmental protection and safety. So
exactly.
Awesome. If anyone else has any questions for Ryan, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll try to get those answered. But we will go ahead and pass it onwards to Calvin and Ben from the Reston Association. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and get started. Thank you all for coming here today. Happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. We are Reston Association's watershed team. Reston Association, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide there, is a community association, essentially a large homeowners association, but we also encompass tenants as members. So, HOA adjacent, with 21,000 plus households, around 65,000 residents. Within Reston Association, we actually are almost like a federation system. Think United States, and then the individual states, we have over 200 sub associations, ranging from townhome HOAs to condominium associations, as well as some apartment buildings, for-profit apartment buildings that are members of the Reston Association. So we, interact very regularly with HOAs. They sort of report to us almost. They have to follow our standards, as well as, their residents following their own standards. And then Reston Association has 3 departments that interface with the public: Parks and Rec and Maintenance, environmental, which Calvin and I fall under, and a covenants department. So if you don't live in an HOA, you might not know what a covenants department is, but essentially these are the folks that help with our rulemaking and enforcement, standard setting, those classic things that people think of when they think of an HOA, and what kind of makes us a little bit different than a standard municipality. And if you wouldn't mind advancing slide there. So as for Calvin and I, and why Reston Association is so interested in salt programming and getting the word out about road salt, the association owns over 1,000 acres of natural or common property, which includes streams, lakes, and ponds in the headwaters in 7 sub-watersheds, primarily in the larger watersheds of Horsepen, sort of to a lesser extent, but also Sugarland Run, and to greatest extent difficult run. And Calvin will talk a little bit more about some of those watersheds, but we are very much interested in, preserving water quality in these areas. We've been doing Save Our Streams monitoring. That's what those little dots are on this map, is our Save Our Streams monitoring sites. We've been doing that for almost or over 2 decades now. So we are very much trying to be stewards of our water resources. You can advance there. So Reston Azan Association, right? So we are the Reston Association. We are a homeowners association adjacent, community association. And so what does that mean for environmental staff and our residents and how we interact with this problem of chloride pollution? It's nice that we get to be a community leader and a source of expert knowledge. And we, have a nature center that's part of the Reston Association. Our Covenant staff are seen as real experts in terms of property management and community management. And so folks come to us oftentimes with challenges that they're having, but it also means that we get to have some flexibility of operations. So managing, 54 tennis courts, 17 pools, we have lots of parking lot. And so as we have learned more about best practices in terms of winter preparedness, we've been able to switch operations from, being more salt-based to being more sand-based in our larger areas. And then, continually trying to train up our maintenance crews on winter salt preparedness best practices. Another benefit is it's really nice. We have environmentally minded residents. We have a close connection with those residents. Being a homeowners association or community association, right? We're a little bit smaller than Fairfax County, which is a pretty big beast for most folks around here, and so people feel comfortable approaching us about issues, and we're able to work with folks on sort of a neighbor to neighbor basis. But we also have challenges, right? While we are an HOA and have enforcement capabilities to a certain extent, it is definitely difficult in terms of environmental issues, the way that our resolutions are set up. And we have a tough rulemaking process with our rest and deed and an ever-changing set of stakeholders back to that idea of, boards and HOAs. These are all folks that are volunteers. And so having basically every year educating a new set of folks that are making decisions for a wide swath of our land cover is difficult. And so working with our Covenants department, our Parks and Rec folks, to really try to be holistic about our education year over year is definitely important to us. So you can go ahead. I'll let Calvin take it away from here.
All right. So as an environmentally minded community organization, we are interested in participating in Salt Watch for a couple reasons. First, we want to identify which bodies of water in Reston are the most impaired. And we also want to engage the community in water quality awareness. For the last 2 winters, we shared a report on chloride levels within the community using results from our staff and volunteers. Last winter, 65 samples were taken by 8 different volunteers. And this August, we had more than 30 volunteer water quality monitors attend a presentation on Reston's water quality, including many of our salt watchers. So we have a really environmentally minded community. We have a lot of people who are engaged in how our water quality is doing. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share some of our data that we've shared with our community. Last winter, there was a lot of road salt applied, and as such, we saw a lot of it getting into our streams, especially when there were winter weather events. So the first winter weather event last year happened around December 10th. We only saw one site with a substantial amount of chloride in the stream after that. And this site actually was receiving drainage from a parking lot that had some improperly stored salt. We contacted Fairfax County about that, and that got pretty much squared away. It didn't have any spikes like that during the rest of the season. And then but the next two storm events, which happened between January 17th and 29th, we saw spikes at pretty much all of our sites. And 8 out of 9 of those sites that we monitored at least twice during that period had chloride concentrations above that toxic level of 230 parts per million for both of those readings. So that is a really big problem because the chronic toxicity in those sites could lead to damage to our invertebrates and fish in those streams. And then more rain on February 22nd and into early March led to another big spike. So we're seeing some spikes, especially with our winter precipitation. Next slide, please. All right, so we wanted to determine which watersheds were the most polluted. Of our 7 sub-watersheds, we had 5 that we were able to monitor last year. Sites in the Colvin Run watershed tended to have really high influence from commercial areas and major roadways, and you'll see that that was one of the watersheds that was particularly impacted, along with Sugarland Run and Dog Run. Both of those watersheds had pretty substantial influence from single-family homes. They also do have Sugarland Run is near Fairfax County Parkway and Dog Run is near Reston Parkway, so they do have some major roadway influence. But there were also large piles of salt seen in both those neighborhoods. So that kind of indicates that some of the salt pollution, it's not just coming from the Department of Transportation, it's coming from oversalting in neighborhoods as well. And then Snake Den Branch and the Glade are 2 less affected watersheds of the ones that we measured. And those are set largely in single family home areas, often with larger lots. The Glade in particular sits within a large buffer area with lots of parks and natural areas. Next slide, please. And we wanted to identify problem neighborhoods so that we could target outreach to them. So drainage basins were delineated for all sites, and we really intend to particularly target outreach material to residents where there were sites with high chloride pollution within a small watershed of 100 acres or less. This site that we have shown was a 21-acre watershed. It had high chloride readings. As you can see, it's a lot of residences within that watershed. So it's really salting coming from that neighborhood that is influencing chloride levels in the stream. And in total, we identified 6 sites that we are going to be targeting outreach materials for. Next slide, please.
And so, what are our next steps and how are we moving forward? Our, basically, salt response just started with Salt Watch when we learned about it, a few years ago. And so since learning about Salt Watch and starting to understand that chloride pollution is an issue and a growing issue in Reston, we want to start having some additional actions just beyond monitoring. What that looks like is those targeted outreach campaigns to neighborhoods identified as oversalters, increasing our coordination with Fairfax County's MS4 program and the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, which is working on a salt action plan, specifically around the Accotink Creek area, but also the wider region. And then executing some wider outreach as well, not just those neighborhoods, but some social media posts to go out, some videos to go out this fall and winter, and potentially even an event sometime this fall to start talking about the really kind of like specific residential and HOA issues surrounding oversalting, things like impacts to commonly owned infrastructure, safety, contracting, and expenses, those things that volunteer board members are really attentive to and worried about. But of course, on top of all that, we're just going to be continuing our salt watch monitoring, trying to grow our network of volunteers. At least earlier, I'm not sure if he's still on, but earlier, one of our great volunteers, Steve Jekus, is here today. And so, we're hoping to continue fostering sort of an environment where folks are curious about the environmental issues in their neighborhoods. And once they learn about them, start to take some action. And with that, I think that our last slide is just our contact information and asking for any questions.
Thank you both so much. Does anyone have any questions for Ben or Calvin at the Reston Association? We have one comment. Greg said, Reston Association seems to be doing good on monitoring and targeting outreach efforts to oversalters. Awesome.
And for anyone curious, if you are, doing Salt Watch and you thought that tool that Calvin used to delineate the drainage basin was kind of interesting, if you live in Fairfax County, that tool is available. If you just search Fairfax County Drainage Basin Delineation Tool, USGS has a similar tool called Stream Stats. So it's a great way to, if you're in a neighborhood and you're doing some monitoring, to try to, learn a little bit more about where exactly water is draining from, if you don't want to get out a topographic map and map out that drainage basin yourself.
Okay, a question in the chat. How do your private contractors take the info you provide?
So that's a great question. We don't have private contractors for Reston Association ourselves. We are hoping to provide some outreach this year to our sub HOAs about how to interact with their private contractors. And we're hoping to use some resources that the Northern Virginia Regional Commission pulls together about outreach to contractors and negotiating with contractors on salting and winter preparedness. So that is a long way of saying TBD.
And Ben and I think also Calvin are part of, similar to what Ryan had talked about earlier, how we have an outreach working group, a salt outreach working group in Maryland run by WSSC Water. The Northern Virginia Regional Commission also has a salt outreach work group as well. And so they're definitely part of that group. And another really great group to sort of talk through some things and then spread some of the same outreach materials throughout the Northern Virginia region. So any other questions for Ben and Calvin? Yeah, and Greg put in the chat, Virginia Department of Transportation and their contractors are the ones who handle most roadways in Virginia.
Yeah, I'll just chime in here really quickly and mention, while the majority of the mileage of the streets in Reston are certainly salted by VDOT, we have a preponderance of parking lots and private roads that are owned by our sub HOAs. None of them are owned by Reston Association, just our recreational parking lots, but those residential parking lots in private streets are definitely a challenge that we were talking about earlier.
Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the poll questions that we had earlier. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. I know that we're a little bit over that 1 hour mark, but we did say this webinar could go until 1:30. So the first poll question that I had asked was, how did you first hear about or get involved in Saltwatch? And so some of those answers that we received were through different newsletters, like from Friends of Cabin John Creek, Friends of Sligo Creek, through our Save Our Streams trainings, different emails, a local nonprofit, and the Virginia Master Naturalists. So some different ways people are getting involved there, but it seems like a lot of the newsletters that we're sending out are reaching different folks. So that's really awesome to see. The second question that I asked was, what have you done beyond monitoring? Things like maybe talk to a neighbor, reduce salt at home, those types of things. Some different answers that we received: talk to our volunteers and neighbors, present webinars to membership, hand out kits, environmental advertising, reduce salt at home and talk to my friends. Share those responsible salt use techniques in late fall webinars or newsletters. Write to state and county officials, share in newsletters, stop use at home, county-led outreach in Virginia, that's awesome. Talk to neighbors, reduce salt at home, go to local town halls, join friends group to protect and preserve the environment, reduce salt at home, sweep up excess salt from a nearby intersection, sign up. I put an info sign up at work. That's a really easy way to get people involved who might have no idea about salting. Webinars, reduce salt at home, community programs, school programs, add Saltwatch to your water quality monitoring. Yeah, and really easy way to find out what's happening in your local backyard, or your own backyard. And then the fourth poll question that we asked was, what could help you leap the hurdle of going beyond monitoring and complete some sort of advocacy action? More available time. I understand that we all need more time in the day. Testify at budget hearings locally, write some letters. Folks might find it helpful to have some sample posts to a neighborhood next door or Facebook page. Write articles to be shared on friend groups. So really spreading out the knowledge of smart salting and that salt actually is a pollutant. And then maybe a pre-typed letter could be helpful to fill out with my own information. And then also how to run a Saltwatch training meeting. Yeah, so those are some great ideas of things that might be helpful to sort of go beyond monitoring. Awesome. And we do have some of those resources available on our website, saltwatch.org. And then especially under the What You Can Do page. Are there any additional questions, or would anyone from any of the other groups who are online today like to share some of the things that you've been doing and working on locally? Feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat, and we can actually go ahead and unmute you if that's something that you'd like to speak about. Yeah, Christine, I should be able to share some of those action ideas in writing. Yeah, and if anyone else wants me to share those ideas with them, please feel free to put your email in the chat and I'll make sure that you get those ideas that people posted. But is there anyone who'd like to speak about your program and some of the initiatives that you've worked on? I know there are a lot of different watershed organizations and groups present today. Yeah, Christine put in the chat, we have a chart of our results from last year. It was very sobering. Calvin has a great question in the chat. For organizations that do purchase the high range test strips, will submissions using them be accepted in reporting to the Clean Water Hub? Yes, they will. So just report it as you normally would with your SaltWatch test strip, and just put in the data reading that you get as normal. And you can share that on the Clean Water Hub. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I really appreciate hearing from all of our speakers and everyone who's interacted in the chat and with the polls. And this isn't the end of this conversation. This is really just the beginning. We wanted to do this regional outreach webinar because a lot of times we don't really communicate well together. We're all sort of in our own little organizational world. And we need to start sharing these results with each other. We need to start sharing some of these tips and these initiatives that we've been working on, because it takes really all of us together to really make a difference in road salt pollution, from really getting that initial knowledge out there of really what's happening in our own backyard. These are some of the test results that I'm finding with the SaltWatch kits. And then going beyond that and really doing some of those advocacy actions. So again, this is not the end of the conversation. This is really just the beginning. And I will be in touch with a lot of you folks, especially the organizations that are in Maryland for the Winter Salt Awareness Week. Hopefully we'll all be able to get together for an event for that, which would be really awesome. But I'm not leaving out our Virginia folks or DC folks either, because we're going to keep having a lot of these conversations too. So thank you everyone so much again for attending today. This webinar has been recorded, and we'll put that video up on our YouTube channel as soon as we can. And we do have a date for our national SaltWatch Kickoff webinar. That date will be, give me 1 second here, November 13th at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And we have two really great panelists who are researchers into freshwater salinization who will be joining us for that. So stay tuned for more information about that. And thank you all who have attended and who have presented today. We really appreciate all of you. So keep up the really great work, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.